And today we're going to speak on purpose and mission, since it's one of the most common questions that are asked. Here's the quote of the day. We have to learn to develop ourselves where we can make the greatest contribution. Peter Drucker. That is the book that we're going to actually go over today. It's called Managing Oneself. It's not a very intimidating book. It's a small little baby book, about a pocket-sized book.
Yay! Peter Drucker was an Austrian-born American management consultant and educator whose writings contributed to the philosophical and practical foundations of the modern business corporation.
In this book, Managing Oneself, Management of Your Own Path, we'll go over some of the key points that he speaks on how to do this. In order to manage your own path, you have to ask yourself 6 key questions. And we'll go over each one, not in depth, but just give you an example of the little each question and what they really mean. What's the thought behind it, so that you can answer these for yourself.
That's right. So let's get to the first question. The first question is, what are my strengths? It's a very common personal development question. And sometimes it's so simple that it's hard to discover. One of the easiest ways to figure out and then start to develop your strengths is by using a method called feedback analysis that Drucker talks about in this book. A person can only perform from a base of strength. By utilizing the feedback analysis, you'll get good at understanding what you're good at. So here's how you do it. First of all, you have a little journal. Maybe you just take notes on your phone. You make a decision in your life, and you write down what you think is going to happen based on that decision, sort of your hypothesis. You come back to it 9 to 18 months later, and you compare the real results about what happened in your life to your hypothesis. For example, you meet a new person. You decide, hey, I think this is going to be a good friend. You write down your book, met Jill today. I think she's going to be an outstanding person to have in my life. 9 to 18 months later, you're looking back, feedback analysis, looking back over your life, and Jill either played out to be a good friend, kind of in the middle, was only an acquaintance. You ended up not being good friends. Maybe Jill completely stabbed you in the back.
From that experience, you can then think about, okay, what red flags didn't I see if she stabbed you in the back? So what sort of moments that you can, because hindsight is 20/20, what key moments where you should have recognized and now you have that in your arsenal to use in future relationship development? Or was it a great friendship, and now that you can see in 18 months later, wow, this friendship turned out amazing, and what are some of the biggest things that I love about this friendship? And as you move forward to a new friendship or finding new friends, developing those relationships, what are you looking for? You know what you like now, and not everyone's the same, but what did you like about this person, and can you get that from other people?
Right, and so then you start to learn yourself. And that's really what the point is here. Understanding what type of people you get along with is building on a strength. It's understanding how you function in life.
So the second question would be, how do I perform? Mostly what this is going, it kind of goes into how do I perform, and question number 3, how do I learn? So you start to think about, am I a reader or am I a listener? With number 2, am I a reader or a listener? Being able to understand whether you learn by reading better or you're listening better. That goes into 3, how do I learn? Are you a visual learner? Is it audio-wise? A good example of this is when we wanted to start reading more books as a personal development goal. We had a hard time just sitting down reading books, since it wasn't a daily habit for us. It wasn't a natural behavior for us.
Yeah.
Even though we know how to read, always elected to lead,
Not to read.
It wasn't necessarily the kind of leisurely time how what I did for fun.
Yeah, God, I hated reading as a kid.
Yeah, I absolutely did.
I never really got through any books at school.
My mom would tell you this story where I got punished, a little side note here, where I got punished, and she sent me to my room to read a book. And if you knew me, you know this was like me really lashing out. But I started ripping the tiny cuts in the corners of those top right corner of these pages of the book, just to kind of, and I didn't read the book. I just was showing my mom that I was going to do anything possible. I was doing something with the book, but I wasn't reading it. And
Every page?
Every page possible, yeah. Anywho, so I was really what's it called when you're
Defiant.
I was defiant. Yes, I was really defiant.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
About reading. Anywho, so when we were first starting to learn how to read, we it wasn't a habit of ours, right? So we moved into reading with audiobooks. So we'd have audiobooks, listening to the story, listening to the books. And these aren't like these are actually like autobiographies or how-to personal development books or research-based books that would tell you on how, there's a good one, Habit. What's it, The Power of Habit.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good book, and that was one of our earlier ones that we read. Or The Happiness Hypothesis was another one that was an
Yeah.
earlier
Oh,
one
that's
that
a
we
good
read.
one.
Yeah, but
But again, I had to listen to those books on audio, at least first, and then, get the hardcover. And there's a whole process to reading these types of books and rereading them more than once, and having a relationship with these books. But we'll get into that another day.
But we knew that our strengths weren't really in being a consistent reader and being able to sit down to read a book.
Cover to cover.
Cover to cover. And so we had to listen to a book, and then we actually started listening to the book with and following along with the book. And it ended up being we'd start to read the book because we've already read it now twice, reading it on our own and getting other new thoughts, having our own sort of interpretations of what's being said and all that.
The point is, we figured out that we were listeners, not readers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And just as a little side note here, because we went to the audiobook side, then we went through following with the book and then was reading it on our own, it started building some self-efficacy that we could actually read books, right? So, and then which made us read more books.
I can read.
I can read. All right, going into the third question. So how do I learn? Knowing exactly how you learn. And there's a bunch of different things you can research out there about how the different types of learning that are out there. So just kind of ask yourself a few questions of what is the best way, best environment, that sort of stuff of how you learn.
These are all just personal development basics. What are my strengths? How do I perform? How do I learn? All three of those roll into what are my values? Question number 4.
So if you go back to listening to episode 2, we kind of get more in depth about how to find your values, but mostly you want to whittle it from 15 specific values down to at max 2 core values that define you. So this will help you see the kind of person you want to see in the mirror looking back at you, right? And sometimes there'll be a conflict between your core value and the strengths that you have. So that you have identified the kind of strengths you have because you did that feedback analysis. If you have strengths in building relationships, or you're pretty disciplined in your health and wellness, or if you're an avid learner, whatever, you're the saver and the money financial planner in your family, those are your strengths, right? Depending on who you are. But then you have a conflict with your core value.
Yeah, a great example of this is a really common story about somebody who goes to college, they get their business degree, they go get this great corporate job, and they're making a lot of money, and they're really great at asset management and some of these things that they studied, and they spend all this time getting really, really good at the wrong thing. It's a strength, and they were doing really great at it, but come to find out their core values is like family and quality time. And so what ends up happening is they miss out on all of that family and quality time because they're having to really be all in at this corporate job. And so now they're having a conflict of interest, right, inside of themselves. That really becomes the ultimate test. Not only are you trying to figure out your strengths and build those, you want to make sure that you're building the right ones that resonate with your core values in order to really build a well-balanced life.
And this leads us into, because you have to know 1 through 4 in order to move into 5 and 6, which are, where do I really belong and what should I contribute? Those are 5 and 6. 5, where do I belong? You have to recognize your strengths, how you perform, how you learn, and your core values, because it helps you set confident barriers based off of all that information you just learned. Those barriers help you then decide whether or not you're going to take this opportunity or not, without a doubt. You don't just say yes to things and then feel guilty about having to go back and say no, or you're feeling awful that you're having to spend your time with this. You'll feel in line with with yourself, because now you know yourself well enough and you've now agreed to an opportunity that aligns with everything that you know about yourself.
Yeah, and when we say opportunity, that's it, right? That's the purpose, that's the mission. You've figured out who you are well enough that you can figure out what your purpose is, where you belong, and what you should be doing within that belonging.
After you've done number 5, it then goes into what should I contribute? It's not necessarily what should I be contributing to, like a charity or anything like that. It's specifically, what should you contribute to this opportunity that you've agreed to move on with? Where and how can you create the most results that will make the biggest impact, make us the biggest difference, and then follow that for the next 18 months.
Yeah, Drucker gives an example in the book specifically of a hospital administrator or manager of some sort who comes in to a hospital. The hospital has, for about the last 30 years, been sort of just riding the wave of its branding, and the hospital has just been able to keep consistent customer base only on its reputation. He decides to take the job. The job aligned with his strengths. He knew how he performed, he knew how he learned, he knew what his values were, so he knew how he was going to be able to do the job, what he would need to ask for himself from that job, and he figured out that that's where he wanted to belong. That was going to be his purpose. Once he got into the job, that's when you start figuring out what you can contribute. This is when you can start moving into making a map of how you're going to actually perform within where you figured out you belong. The hospital manager went in and decided, out of all these key areas that had issues within the hospital, he was going to first contribute and tackle the ER, which was very sloppy and needed some processes work. Well, once they got that rolling and got that under control, it boosted up the hospital and it became one of the greatest hospitals.
It became the example for the other ERs nationally.
Right. That is what it said. It became an example. So anyways, that's question number 6.
So to sum this back up, the key points are answering 6 questions. What are my strengths? How do I perform? How do I learn? What are my values? And once you know those, you can move into where do I belong and what should I contribute? I'll go into just an example for us. Maybe it can help you get through these questions. We were
recently asked if we would be interested in
consulting and managing with a specific company that's really small. It's not a huge company. It's just a real small one.
So we had to ask ourselves these same questions. You know, we're running our own business. Obviously, we are very busy, and we had to decide, did we have the strength to take this on? You know, I had to know myself well enough about how I perform. Could we perform at a level of high expectation and be of benefit to this small company? Understanding how we learn and what our values are. Is taking on another project going to take away from my home life and other things that I value? Or was it going to be well balanced enough that we could move forward? After we put some thought into that, we decided, yeah, we could belong here. We could help scale this business. We have the skills, the strength, the positive dynamic and outgoing personalities
that were needed for this company. And we learned pretty quickly on kind of the things that need to be improved, and we know the exact steps on how to improve it, since our business is to create processes in self-development and improvement. The only drawback, one of the biggest things we had to discern about, was, were we going to be the best consultants or coaches for this business, since we have very minimal experience with coaching businesses in this manner.
Executive coaching.
Yes, with executive coaching. And so we were upfront about it, let them know that this is something that's not necessarily one of our strengths or where we have the most experience in coaching in. And
but we're damn good at building processes, breaking things down to a simple understanding, and making things efficient.
So then we knew, like, okay, yeah, we could, because of our other strengths and how we learn and how we perform, those outweighed this weakness of ours. And so then we knew that we belonged in this realm, and
Took the opportunity.
Took the opportunity. So then we can add executive coaching to our belt. Anywho, so I hope that helped give you a better idea, perspective of how these can be used in as you answer these questions. I do want you to think about the specific areas of life as you're answering these questions: relationships, wellness or health, intellectual learning, your financial health, and purpose, mission, or maybe your spirituality. Think of those different areas of life. Those are the main areas of life.
Yeah, consider those areas when you're answering these 6 questions. And now you've had your first run through of Drucker's Managing Oneself.
Thank you for listening. We really appreciate your time, and we hope we provide true value. Let us know if you have further questions or other questions about this book, or if there's other topics that you're interested in hearing about. We would definitely love your feedback for our feedback analysis. Thank you so much for your time. This is Lenora.
And I'm Gates, and you've been listening to the MotoMeLife podcast.
And remember, stay motivated. If you're not going to take care of your body and mind, where are you going to live?